It's more ski, have your own ski ball.
10 days in Tuscany.
My blood is out for sure. And that red wine,
Right.
Brunello.
Red sauce and red wine.
Good evening. Welcome to the June 14th Public Works Session of the Rockville Center Board of Education. Please rise for the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Gavin, we have recognition of staff members tonight.
We definitely do. Thank you, Madam President. Before I talk about the teacher mentors, I do want to say, Bob, it's your last meeting. We're really sad to see you go, but we are so thankful for 47 years of Board of Ed meetings. So I wanted to make sure that I remembered to say that, absolutely. 47 years ago, I was 3 and Bob was working. All good stuff, all good stuff. We do have, Madam President and the board, we do have our mentors here tonight, a few of our mentors here. Teacher mentors play a vital role in the development and growth of educators, making their importance undeniable. These mentors provide invaluable support, guidance, and expertise to novice teachers, helping them navigate the complexities of the profession. By sharing their knowledge and experience, mentors often offer insights into effective teaching strategies, classroom management techniques, and curriculum design. They serve as role models, inspiring new teachers to strive for excellence and encouraging them to refine their instructional practice. So I want to kick it over to Mr. Murphy, who's going to talk about our mentors right now. Mr. Murphy,
Mr. Gavin.
how are you, sir?
Ms. Kelly, board members, thank you. So last board meeting, we recognized 2 important milestones in a professional career, teachers who receive tenure and our retirees. And in between those 2 times is where your legacy is created. At the risk of overstating the obvious, you're not alone in creation of that legacy, and we're very fortunate in Rockville Center to have a collaborative spirit and a partnership that has only gained strength over time. And one of our areas of supreme strength is our mentorship program that both the Board of Education, the Rockville Center Teachers Association, and the administration not only support, but are a source of immense pride. So to recognize the legion of veteran teachers who willingly and voluntarily support our newer teachers through their first year that we can all remember for the rest of our lives. We have the spokesperson who spearheads our mentorship program is Karen John to speak a few minutes. Then to introduce some volunteers who gave up their evenings yet again to represent the vast majority of our mentors, and then we'll reflect on some of the names who couldn't be here, but we will also recognize. Miss John.
Good evening. As teachers, we are here to not only educate the wonderful students of Rockville Center, but also to work and to operate as a family, caring, supportive, and encouraging of one another. For without such, there would not be the amazing mentors who sit here before you this evening. It is with great honor that Christy and I would like to thank each and every one of you for your outstanding work this year. Please join me in a round of applause for these teachers who exemplify such expectations. Thank you. I'd like to recognize Lisa Kolish, Gina Pasteur, Christine Dodd, and Patricia Monterano. Thank you so much. And if I might add, these teachers were an integral part of my career here in Rockville Center, starting out as a TA, side by side with Gina, in Lisa Kolish's room, popping into Christine Dodd's room, and always seeing Trish with the technical support. Thank you so much for what you've done for me and what you continue to do for the new teachers in this district. Thank you.
Yes.
Yep, come in.
Making you smile. Come on.
Good, Eric.
Come on. Come on, buddy. Thank you. Thank you. Hey, how are you?
So those teachers were a representative sample of a much larger group. There were 38 mentorship partners this year. So I'd like to very briefly but very sincerely thank those other teachers whose names are displayed from all schools being represented and some district-wide positions for their work in working with our new teachers and bolstering that sense of collaboration. Ms. Patty Barkwell, Ms. Christy Bonino, Ms. Christine Brown, Dr. Nancy Chase, Dawn Conlon, Bridget Connors, Christine Dodd, Dr. Amy Eckelman, Jacqueline Falkenham, Karen Feldkamp, Megan Fitzgerald, Marianne Fioramonti, Michael Flynn, Dawn Gallagher, Merrill Goodman, Jessica Goro, Andrea Grubb, Tommy Hessel, Keith Hyam, Karen John, Catherine Jonassen, Caitlin Keel, Lisa College, Tara Lynch, Brian Manolakis, Stephen Mariano, Kristen McCormick, Carolyn McGuire, Patricia Montemarano, Deirdre Murtaugh, Cody Eng, Amy O'Leary, Gina Pastier, Melissa Rice, Dr. Janine Rose, Melanie Rubin, Anne-Marie Sealing, Christy Selekia Ferrone, Virginia Southwick, Alexis Weber, and Teresa Wang. A collective thank you from the district and from administration and the Board of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the board, once again, thank you to all our mentors, especially for those of you who came to see us tonight. Thank you so much for your important work. Mr. Gavin, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Madam President. As we walk down the hallway here at Southside High School, we pass the gymnasium with all of the lovely desks set up for Regents exam. So we want to just wish all of our students taking Regents exam this week and next the best of luck, and hopefully you are using this time well to prepare. Today is Flag Day, as we know, and Rockville Center does Flag Day better than pretty much anyone that I've ever seen. I know that Mr. Murphy and Dr. Moriarty went down to Covert. I went to Wilson and to Hewitt today for Flag Day celebrations. Hewitt second graders came out and did the Nifty 50 States and blew us away with not only their patriotism, but their encyclopedic knowledge of all of our 50 states, so that was great. And then I went over to Wilson, where we gathered on the front lawn as an entire school body. Mr. Duffy led us through and the student council reps led us through a wonderful display of what the flag means and what it represents and why it should be important here. So that was great. I really love those activities today. I also want to shout out our center stage production of Wizard of Oz, which was amazing. It was an inspiring display of empathy and inclusivity as we had students working together to create the wonderful magical production of the Wizard of Oz. Through the collaborative efforts of students and adults all working together, they created a production that showcased the unique abilities and talents of every participant. As Dorothy herself once said, there's no place like home. And these students provided that when diverse minds come together, they create a magical world where everyone feels valued and celebrated. It was a terrific event and one that Rockville Center Schools should be extraordinarily proud of. I know I was to be a part of it. It was great. It's June, which means that we are ending our year with celebrations of accomplishments of our students. Congratulations to all of our students on a tremendously successful year. As we reflect upon the accomplishment, challenges, and growth we have experienced together, let us be reminded that far better things are still ahead. So even though we celebrate what we did this year, we can also keep an eye to what's coming forward. With each passing year, we have the chance to build upon our achievements, learn from our experiences, and create an even brighter future for our students and our community. Together, we continue to grow and foster an environment that nurtures curiosity, inspires creativity, and promotes excellence. I'm looking forward to celebrating this remarkable year and eagerly anticipate the endless possibilities that lie ahead. I'm extraordinarily grateful to the Board of Ed, to my administrative team, to our teachers, and to the community for the opportunity to work here and work with these great kids. It's graduation time as well. I want to wish all of our graduates from Southside High School, our 8th graders, our 5th graders, and of course, our pre-K kids that are moving up to the grand stage of kindergarten. Congratulations to everyone, and I want to thank all of our teachers, administrators, and parents for their support of our students, and I am looking forward to attending all of these ceremonies. That's my report tonight, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gavin. We will begin the public works session, and we have class size research results presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to introduce, we have both Dr. Moriarty and Mr. Bartels that will be walking us through the presentation tonight. We've heard publicly and from email correspondence and from personal correspondence that we have a lot of questions about class size. And the way that our district is currently configured, we have opportunities for very small class sizes at certain buildings and at certain grades, and then other buildings where it seems to be larger. So we wanted to, with the direction of the board, to have a conversation about what does the research say about class size, and then look at the impact if we ever change the policy. What would that look like in terms of dollars? What would that look like in terms of space concerns? So the presentation tonight, Dr. Moriarty will just walk us through what is the educational impact of class size. She'll talk a little bit about the research, and then Mr. Bartels will talk about if we change the policy, what does that look like for each of our buildings? Okay? And then have a conversation. Then we can talk together as a board and an administration and talk together about next steps. So I will kick it over to Dr. Moriarty.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gavin. So class size reduction has been suggested by several researchers as a strategy to address certain challenges in education, such as mitigating the effects of inequalities, improving academic achievement, and strengthening foundational skills. Over the past 2 decades, there have been numerous states and the federal government that have made investments in class size reduction programs with a particular focus on K through 3. The class size reduction does involve hiring and training additional teachers, constructing new classrooms, and implementing policies that limit the number of students per class. It's important for us to note that while class size reduction is recognized as a potentially effective strategy, its implementation should consider various factors, including available resources, infrastructure, and teacher-student ratios. So tonight, we're just going to review 2 major studies in class size reduction. So the first and the most significant study on class size reduction has been the Student-Teacher Achievement Ratio, or what is commonly known as STAR, which occurred in Tennessee in the late 1980s and the early 1990s. So the project involved 3 distinct class size categories: small class sizes that had approximately 15 students per teacher. Some of the classes did have 17 students per teacher. A regular class size with approximately 22 to 25 students per teacher, and then a regular classroom with an aide, which had 22 to 25 students per teacher, supplemented with a full-time teaching assistant. Overall, students demonstrated higher academic achievement, improved test scores, and increased engagement with the smaller class sizes, which was the 15 students per teacher or the 17 students per teacher, depending on the class. This was later followed by the Student Achievement Guarantee in Education, or what is called SAGE in Wisconsin. It was a multifaceted reform movement aimed at reducing the impact of poverty on student achievement. The SAGE law defined class size reduction as a reduced class size up to 15. Yet there was still local control over the municipalities of their educational systems, so they allowed 4 distinct configurations of class size reduction. A single teacher with 15 students a single teacher with 15 students in a class, or 2 teachers sharing a single room but practicing separately, creating a 30 to 2 but in a shared space. Then a pupil-teacher ratio approach, allowing 2 full-time teachers in a classroom with up to 30 students. And then a hybrid called a SAGE block approach, where there was a part-time teacher added to teach literacy and math during the most important subjects with that full-time teacher, thereby reducing the student-to-teacher ratio. The results of the 1996 to 97, 97 to 98, and 98 to 99 evaluations are consistent with the Tennessee Student-Teacher Achievement Ratio Project. On this slide, I want to focus on the second quote. There is no magic number, but the small classes in the STAR study were between 13 and 17 students. So then states look at that and say, how much can we afford, and come up with a number like California did, who also conducted a study. And they came up with 20. There is nothing you can point to in research that says, well, 20 is a magic number. So the numbers are just kind of just based on the average of what has worked with STAR and what has worked with SAGE. So if we were to be looking at smaller class sizes, we would want to consider the recommendations from literature. Early intervention seems to be the key, so kindergarten or pre-kindergarten starting it. Sufficient duration, maintaining the small class size environment for at least 3 years, maybe up to 4 years, so we'd be looking at pre-K to 3 or K to 3. Intense treatment, where pupil spends all day, every day in the small class, avoiding pullouts. Mixed ability groupings, where we randomly assign students and teachers to a class. Employ a cohort model for several years so students can develop a sense of community, and evaluate process and outcomes carefully and share the results.
Okay. So we really can't talk about class size without looking at our enrollments and knowing where our enrollments are going or headed. So I want to just talk about that a little bit first. So on this chart, you can see these are the enrollments for each of our elementary schools. So it's our K to 5 enrollments going back to 98, 99. And you can see, well, there's little ups and downs. We're pretty much the same for each school. Hewitt is actually 1 student less than they had in 98, 99. Wilson is down 51, but they were up those 50 just a couple of years ago. Covert is up 7 students from where they were. Watson is down 9, and Riverside is down 54. They're the only building that's kind of, seems like they're trending down a little bit in the last couple of years. They were up 4 or 5 years ago, but they've come down a little bit. Overall district enrollment, we're down about 108 students from 98, 99. But again, the line is fairly steady, fairly consistent, with few ups, few downs. So basically, it looks like, you know, we expect enrollment trends to continue. We'll see a little bit higher, a little bit lower, any particular school. That's the difficult part. You know, our enrollment's been pretty consistent, but in each individual school in any given year, it changes a little bit. As far as the history of our class sizes, what we've done prior to 05, 06, this goes back to at least the late 1990s. I don't know when it was changed before that. Grades K to 2 had a cap of 25. Grade 3 was at 27, and grades 4 and 5 were capped at 28. That changed in 2005, 2006, where we went K to 2 stayed at 25, but then grades 3 through 5 were moved down to 26. Then in 2010, 2011, the board changed all grades to a cap of 25 K to 5. And that's where we are now. So this slide is really a snapshot of where we are today. This number will change based on daily enrollments or disenrollments as people move. So we're just looking at a snapshot for these discussion purposes. This shows where each of our buildings would be next year if we continue with the class size, class cap of 25. So you can see Covert would have 2 sections per grade level. We also have an 812 and a 1212 class. There'll be 3 of those classes. That would be 15 sections. I also listed on this slide the total number of classrooms in the building. So that's rooms that would be available for a full class. There are some smaller rooms in different buildings. A couple of buildings have art and music rooms. I did not include those for purposes of this discussion because that would then kick them out. So they have 15 out of their 16 classrooms are utilized right now for next year. In Hewitt, we're looking at 21 regular sections and 1 special education section for a total of 22 classrooms. There are 23 total classrooms right now at Hewitt School. At Riverside, it looks like we're going to have 9 sections for next year, and we have 11 classrooms. At Watson, again, two sections per grade level, so 12 sections at Watson. There are 15 classrooms at Watson. And at Wilson, with 3 sections at a grade level, there are 18 sections projected for next year. They have 21 classrooms. So that totals, the number I have down at the bottom there is 76 total classrooms that we're projecting for next year. What I do on this slide is make a small change. I'm just looking at K-2, changing those class sizes from 25 to 22. So just that one small change, just for those 3 grade levels. And what you see in orange are the impacts. So at Covert, grades kindergarten, first, and second grade would all be impacted when go to 3 sections each. Hewitt, only their first grade would change. Wilson's first grade would change also with an extra section. The rest of the district would remain the same with that small change. However, what that does is it puts Covert up to 18 classrooms that they would need. We only have 16. So that would immediately generate other discussions. It would be too quick to try to build anything there, additional classrooms. We would have to look at the special education classes, which have been there. Do we then move them to another building? So there's other pieces, there's lots of pieces to this discussion of changing class size and different things that you might have to do, and that, that could be one scenario. This next slide is a much bigger change. So looking if we went K-5 and changed everybody down to 20 students, to a cap of 20 students K-5. You see, every class at Covert would be impacted. 5 of the 6 grade levels at Hewitt would be impacted. Riverside, only 1 of them would be impacted. Watson, only 2. But Wilson, 5 of the 6 would be impacted. So when you look at now the total sections, Covert would need 5 more classrooms than they currently have. Hewitt would need 4 more classrooms. Riverside would have enough. They'd be able to fit. Watson would be able to fit. But Wilson would be short by 2 classrooms. So we go from needing 76 sections to, in the small change scenario, 81 sections to 95 sections. And we only have 86 classrooms in the entire district, so even if we wanted to go to 20 and try to reassign students to other buildings, we don't have enough classrooms to do that. So no matter what we're talking about, every incremental piece is going to have an impact, and it could be different at every building. So in terms of a discussion, we need to just keep all those things under consideration. As far as the cost impacts, so just took one scenario, the large scenario, if we had to go back down to 20 students in a class, that would mean we'd have an additional 19 sections, so we need an additional 19 teachers. We would also need an additional 11 classrooms. Our teachers, we're running an estimate of about $100,000 with salary and benefits for a new teacher, so that would be $1.9 million, or again, $100,000 for every additional section you would need. Classrooms are about $1,000 a square foot. We figure about 1,000 square feet for each classroom we would have to add. That would be about 900 square foot classroom, plus another 100 square feet for hallway adjoining space to get to that point. So that would be $11 million that we would have to do for construction. And again, any construction we would have to do would have to go through design, would have to get approved by the state, and there would be a long time frame to get that done. So it would be at least 2 or 3 years before we can get the building done. So in addition to the immediate impact on our schools on a decision, this decision may have to be planned out over a number of years if we should decide to change our caps. Some other things to take into consideration is, I'm just looking at the classroom teachers. So as we break down these sections and have additional classes, additional sections, we would probably need additional specials areas. So art, music, phys ed, we would need additional teachers to cover those classes, not a one-for-one, but there will be additional sections because you can't just put together those classes of, like if we break down 24s to 17s and 18s, you can't then put 35 students, try to double them up, save there. So there's an additional requirement for staffing, and that could also incur additional classroom space, additional places for those people to meet. One other consideration I just wanted to bring up was pre-kindergarten. So we have a pre-K program. We have $1 million or so in pre-K aid to take advantage of. We cannot take advantage of that money because we just don't have the space here in Rockville Center. At 20 students per class, which would be kind of the cap for a pre-K program, that would require 16 classrooms. Again, $16 million to build those classrooms and $1.6 million for the staffing to run those. And again, specials come into play. They're not required for a pre-K program. Again, we'd have to plan out the exact type of program that we're looking for. So those are really kind of the numbers. Again, staffing, got to figure $100,000 for each additional section and about $1 million for each additional classroom.
So, thank you, Mr. Bartels. So a couple questions. Number one, if you have additional sections, obviously those costs are ongoing. So it's not just something that you do once and you pay for it, it's there and it's there all the time if you're going to change a class guideline. The second piece is, for the construction, there's the time delay, but that is a one-time cost. So you're going to build it once, hopefully, and not have to build it again. But there is the construction delay, the approval by the state, all of which takes time to phase in. I think it's important for the board to consider. I know this has been an ongoing issue historically here in Rockville Center, going back 30 years, that we have had inequities in class size. And for right now, given the space concerns, it would be after discussion, it would be my recommendation that we keep this in place, but we open the discussion, going forward with the community, engaged stakeholders in what kind of things are important, what space concerns are really, on the top of the list in terms of our community, each one of the elementary buildings, so on and so forth. So, in terms of this, we understand that the recommendation from research says 15. We didn't even go to 15, and you saw how much it cost just to go to 20. So we have to be pragmatic about things here as well. So we have to try to make sure that we're balancing the needs of the taxpayer with providing the best educational program that we can. And I'd be happy to take any questions, or we would be happy to take any questions from the board.
Thank you. Comments or questions from the board?
I have, I guess, a few comments. I understand the community's concern about class size. I feel like as a parent, it's a concern that I've had since my own children were in kindergarten. But I think looking at research, listening to research, I feel like class size sometimes seems like it's the answer to the problem. Smaller class size will equal better results. And yes, there is research that shows us that in primary grades especially, that can be true.
Can be, yeah.
It can be true.
Can be, yep.
It doesn't
100%.
necessarily mean that it is. And the study that we are going off of, which is the largest study we have, happened in the 1980s and 1990s. Our students today are very different than that. For me personally, moving forward, having a conversation about class size, which will result in millions of dollars of spending, I think we need to have very substantial data from our district that has shown that in Rockville Center, that we can take that research, we can take our own research, that it is generalized to our students, that show smaller class size in Rockville Center has resulted in higher achievement. And absent that data, for me, I'm feeling like class size feels like not the best intervention that we can use to improve student achievement. And even looking in other meta-analysis, John Hattie, he puts class size at a 0.21, which
Right.
isn't even at your 0.40, which is a full class size, or a full year of progress, I should say. It's rated very low, where there's many other interventions that can have much more substantial effect and impact on student achievement. But that's not to say, however, with class size, next year, more in the immediate, I do think it's important that, we have this number 25, which we can see why the number 25 is important. But I have a hard time with the one-size-fits-all model, which I think everybody knows, where we could have a class that is slated to be at 24 and 25, but with that mix of students that's in that class, it could be a high-need grade. I would like us to take a closer look at those specific grades as recommended by building principals, saying that, 25 in these classes or 24 here doesn't feel best for these kids. And I know that we like to have a flat policy on things, but sometimes for me, like just as a parent, as an educator, I don't always like that. I understand why 25 has to work, and I'm not saying that I want to change that, but I do think that we should take into account student differentials, student differentiation, and approach class size in that manner, where we've received emails about specific grades in specific schools. We're aware of those. We should be looking at those grades and not just saying, well, this is our number, so that's our number, and we're going to move on. Like, I would like to take a closer look at those things. I'm also wondering, not related specifically to class size, but in looking at our enrollment for next year, it does look like we have classroom space in every single building. There's going to be open classrooms. Some of those maybe are purposed for art or whatever.
Or music, right.
But in the places where we have extra classrooms, is there a possibility of moving sections of pre-K into those buildings? We have aid we're not using. We don't have space in district that we can find anywhere, but it seems like we have space. So if there are students like at Watson or at Riverside or potentially at Covert, that we could get sections in, especially, and I know when it comes to that, it would go to a lottery, but we might have caregivers who don't have access to transportation or who cannot access Oceanside. Whereas if we had in-district pre-K, that's going to open up access to those families. Like if we have the space and we can't do anything about class size anyway, is that a possibility that we could look into?
I think it's something that we could look forward to. I don't know if we can scale that right now this year in terms of for next year, but it's certainly something we could look at as the enrollment changes. The only problem I have with that particular approach is that there might be some year where we have 2 classes and people get used to 2 classes, and then the next year we have 0 at a particular building. So this year might be a great year for Riverside to open up a section, but next year it might be, it might not happen, you know what I mean? So
Yep, which
the
is fine.
flexibility of the enrollment would have to be something that we have an in-depth conversation with the community about, so that they understand that, like, we're not giving and then taking away. And I think, if I had young kids, that would be a concern for me.
Yeah.
We still have the, how many seats now is it, Jeannie, in Oceanside?
We have 101.
101 seats in Oceanside for pre-K right now. Do we have our full enrollments there?
Just about.
Just about, but we're not filled.
There's a few seats left.
Yeah.
So we still have a little bit of room there. And it could be something that we look for. I like that idea.
Yeah, even if parents were to know, like, we're going to accommodate as many as we can in district, and that will fluctuate from year to year. And I think most districts who have pre-K not in have the same issues, where some years they have X amount of spots at this center, X amount of spots at that center, and it's just known it's going to fluctuate. But I would love if we had an in Rockville Center option, because I think
I
a
would
lot
love
of
that as
people are
well.
not
Yes.
enrolling in Oceanside because they can't make the drive, they can't get there, it conflicts with schedule, where it opens spots and it opens opportunity.
We actually did ask the parents that go to Oceanside if the drive was a major, major factor or was a major hindrance. And we were actually surprised that some people didn't think it was an issue at all. I thought it was going to be a major issue.
Yeah.
But the people that went there loved the program.
Yeah.
They got the pool, which we don't have in any spot, that I can tell you right
Well,
now.
that would be the plus of
Right,
staying there.
right.
You know, it's that option of, it
Right.
works for some, it doesn't for others. I
Yep.
just think the more options we can give to people, especially if we have the space and we have the money that's just sitting there, we should really try to offer it. But outside of that, thank you so much for this presentation. I think it was excellent, and I think it really is very informative about what our possibilities are. So thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. This is definitely an ongoing issue that I think in the future, to decide what you're all going to do, because I won't be here, but I'll be there, you need to have more input from the community about whatever the solutions are that you're going to have. So, and years ago, when I was on PTA, I remember speaking to Dr. Johnson about this, and people were suggesting, well, do we just not have our own community school buildings? And people said, oh, the history of that, you can't do that. They'll attack me. There's no way. That's not, the community doesn't want it. That was true then. I don't know if it's true now, and who knows if that would be the temperature of the community if we did a survey. But you kind of have to look at all options. We're space poor, and this is a problem year after year. So I appreciate everything that you did. And the other question I had was, I'm just going to target in on Hewitt's fifth grade that's at the tipping point, because we did get some letters about that. In terms of the changes that we've made with the ICT model, as opposed to we used to have inclusion class with push-in, pull-outs, all of that, how is that going to affect, say, in particular, that grade? Are all of the grades, are all of the classes in a grade an ICT classroom with 2 teachers, or is it just some classes that
I
have?
don't think it's all, but Jeannie would
One
probably know
per
that better.
grade at
One per
Hewitt,
grade.
one per grade. So one of those sections is an ICT section.
Okay. So that could affect the fact that the class is so packed in all 3. Looking at the research and the fits that they have for changing, if your class is bigger, right? You have 2 teachers in the room and all those models that you've presented, that's not necessarily what's happening in Hewitt in that class, right?
So what we are doing at Hewitt is that we have the one ICT, so you'll have the 2 teachers to the 25 students in the class. And then in the other classes, we have our AIS teachers pushing in during reading and then during math.
So that other model that
That
is
other
mentioned.
model, right. And so what was interesting about the SAGE report in and of itself is that they didn't find a difference between those 4 class configurations. They found that it was pretty consistent with the STAR findings, that just reducing the student-to-teacher ratio and making sure you had 2 teachers in the room during integral parts of the day also had the same results of having a 15-to-1.
Okay.
And then there's other research out there too, and other research that's coming from California and Florida. They have various results, mixed results, and some with, negative results, like there's no difference. But that all goes back to exactly what Mrs. Messier was talking about with all the other factors that go on inside of a classroom, and teacher preparedness, the practices that we use, looking at John Hattie's meta-analysis and all of those different practices.
Be interesting to see how all the changes impact with the data, like you suggest. What changes we've made, what we can put together to say how have all those changes impact the learning experience in the classroom, even if it's a bigger number than what we're happy with.
Right.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. We've had so many iterations of this. Literally, before I got on the board, I was on committees. I think Janet Gruner was on that committee. So many conversations and different factors taken in. And I agree with Erica. I had written that down as well, that I think if we were to pursue any change, we'd have to really zone in on our sections and our academic achievement at every level to see, before we would make a blanket statement about the 15 being the ideal number. I mean, we just heard recently from parents saying that that small class size had some unintended consequences that were not positive for students, and I worry about that. So we don't want to do a formula that just kind of, we think works. And I know, Robert, in the past, we've had principals that aren't even here anymore that have said, even if I went over that number, even if we got to the 25 per class, I couldn't split if I wanted to. I'm not taking away the art room. I don't even have an art room to take away. So we've had it happen at every level in every building where they've been put in scenarios that that number didn't work for them. Even if the parents wanted to split at 25, they couldn't. So one of my questions is, I see that we're at 76, going into 23, 24. What do we budget for, though? So 76 is what we actually have, but did we budget for 78? Do we budget for 80? I'm just curious what we budgeted for next year.
We budgeted for 78.
We're 78, okay, so, if we take that we have two sections right now that we are possibly capable of splitting before now we're going into contingency, do we have a contingency budget in case we went to 80 sections?
We have, based on our staffing projections for next year, and we have some extra money in there.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I mean, really, I think the most immediate goal is to look at everything building by building and figure out what we have budgeted and what we could do. So what I will tell you is another unintended consequence of the number game, and we've seen happen and really concerns me fiscally, is that when you have a section like this one at Hewitt that has the 25, 25, 25 right now, you're literally waiting on one student
Yep.
to make this impact. And that becomes a rush at the finish. Is the packet real? Is it authentic? That person signs up and doesn't show up on day one. And now we have split sections, and we've done this across the buildings. I'm only kind of pulling out Hewitt right now because we're on that cusp right now, so we're waiting on that golden child. They wait for the one child to come to split these sections, and we've seen this happen year over year. And we've also been burned where then that doesn't come to fruition. And now we've put that $100,000 teacher there. So I get very concerned just about numbers. So I do want us to really look at school by school, classroom by classroom, see what makes sense. And also fiscally looking at our secondary sections and what we're running at what levels. Because when we run small classes at secondary levels, then we are impacting our elementary budget as well. So I think we have to look at the whole picture here, is really my takeaway from the entire thing, that we're looking at K-5 right now, but we have an impact from secondary down on K-5 that I think we have to be responsible for looking at as well. We've had people ask us why we can't rezone. That's as long-term a project as construction, and that also has to take into account the volatility of enrollment, because construction also, if you go back to your last bond, Wilson wasn't even a factor, but Watson was. You look at the trends, Watson comes down, Wilson went up.
Yep.
Now Wilson's coming down. So if we had done a bond 4 years ago, Wilson would have been, so when you look at that graph, it's really telling about that unpredictability of planning when it comes to construction and bonds and conversation, and that would be the same with rezoning, because we could rezone thinking we need to help a building out, and then that building changes within 3 years' time.
It's true. Watson had that bubble of two sections where there was two grade levels where there were three sections, and that kind of floated its way through.
Yep.
And that is why they got extra classrooms. Similar with Wilson, they had two grade levels with four sections, and it kind of floated its way through. And now Watson's down to two sections per grade level, Wilson's at three per grade level.
Right.
So-
One conversation, though, that I just want to point out, when you look at those charts and we've seen the volatility, there's one consistency, and that's that Riverside is at a smaller level. And a lot of the conversations we had in the past was about keeping that school full and making sure that there were the best opportunities for the students at Riverside. I know we have a new principal coming in, hopefully a new assessment of looking at that, but I do want to give particular focus there, because when we split at those low numbers, we want to make sure that we at least have a certain amount of sections. I think that that was the conversation we always had about Riverside, was making sure that we didn't dip below a certain amount of sections in that building, because that school had the danger of becoming too small. And we're seeing maybe a little bit more volatility in the other buildings, but we're seeing consistently small classes there. And I just think in whatever research we do, we really keep a focus on that building. That would be my kind of
That would be
comment on
something you
going
look
forward.
at
Yeah,
in terms of like the
100%.
zones. If you're gonna look at
Yes.
zones,
right,
you know, you would look at how the district's currently zoned and draw the places that have space.
Right.
And try to draw from the places that don't.
There was a time, that was offered. You
Right.
know, we looked at what buildings, so if you were at Hewitt at the time that Christine and I had kindergartners there, you couldn't come to Hewitt unless you were zoned for it. But because we were spilling over, there were options to look at buildings like Riverside but that has unintended consequences as well.
yeah,
I'm not
it does,
recommending that. I'm just saying that we've been through so many different trial periods here.
And part of that was with the Avalon. So when
Right.
the Avalon came on, we zoned them with Riverside, hoping that if there were additional students there, that would go down to that
Right.
school, but there really hasn't been a great influx of students, which we kind of had thought
Right.
or initially, based on the apartments, and it's kind of played out, but.
But we had good intentions to
Well, we
make
had
sure
good
that
intentions
Riverside
to-
stayed full.
Exactly, right,
And
exactly.
so, but I'm just adding that there
Mm-hmm.
is that unintended consequence then of when the other people left Hewitt, where did they go? And then they overcrowded Wilson.
Right.
So this is such a complicated thing is really where I'm coming from. This is not something to be taken lightly. I don't think it's something that could be changed quickly. And I agree with Christine, I think it needs a lot of input, and really at every single building, because not every building is created equal. So I'm comfortable to stay at the 25 right now and just make sure that we have, we're fiscally responsible going forward. You have enough sections covered. We look at these as best we can, but we also hopefully don't get packets that aren't real, and we make decisions based off of numbers we expect but don't show up. So, thank you.
Thank you. I think the big question here, as we're all seeing it, is to how to provide the best learning environment under our existing infrastructure and conditions. So it's helpful to look at the big picture and see that it's more than one grade and one school, and how the whole K-5 experience is really impacted. I wondered, since you mentioned pre-K grant funds being available that we're not able to access, have you heard any sort of other potential funding, either at the state level or the federal level, to make a reality what their recommendations are, right? We have this education reform movement that says smaller classes, but no money is attached to it.
Yes, and we actually asked if they were gonna change the UPK funding, would they allow us to build space, right? So, and the answer was a flat no. We did that right here in this room with all of our political representatives. We said it would be really helpful for us because we're space poor, but we want to we're program rich and space poor. We would like to, continue to, expand our program. Would you be able to utilize the money in this way? No. There's a per pupil allocation that follows the pupil. That's the only money you get. None of it can be used for facilities development. And we asked for that directly.
Yep.
Directly. And usually the politicians give you we'll look into it. This time they were just no,
No.
can't do that. So
All
it was
right,
pretty definitive.
we'll keep asking. In terms of the Riverside question, which I think is always in the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about class sizes and enrollment, I feel as if there are ways, as Dr. Moriarty pointed out, ways to make a big class smaller, right? Whether it's small group work or additional instructors, team teaching. How then can we think creatively about how to make a small class bigger, right? What are the ways maybe we, do a one room schoolhouse sort of model? How do we think creatively? Is there research going on in that direction as to how we can increase opportunities and whether it's socialization or, you know what I mean? Making
No, I
a
definitely know
small
what you
class
mean.
bigger. How do we do the opposite of sometimes what we're more focused on? So that's something we continue to think
There
about.
is research on that where it's multi-age classrooms where you might have, let's say you have 15 second graders and 17 first graders. They spend parts of the day together. Whatever the lesson plan is, and you would do an instructional design where they spend parts of the day together. in my teaching career, I worked with, in Garden City with a teacher who did a multi-age classroom. It was a bigger number, but I could go back and look, I have somewhere in my files all that about multi-age classrooms that would do what you're trying to talk about, which is trying to make a smaller class bigger.
Yeah, just make the best possible learning experience for whoever is impacted by the ebbs and flows of population.
Maybe even in fifth grade, we do things intra-district, right? Where we get the kids interacting from the small classes more with the other buildings because they're now going to go to middle school and they might be coming from that small environment like you're talking about. Maybe that's a way to do it, intra-district, use our own students with one another.
Right. Or as they do with Ashokan, right? Riverside and
Right.
Wilson go together. And
Combos.
there's, those sort of opportunities maybe a little bit more regularly to branch out.
We started, in fifth grade particularly, we started more common experiences together. That's something that the fifth grade teacher started last year, including like common curricular experiences, common experiences like when they get together on Darcy Field, where they all get together and they have like a big competition, which is a lot of fun. Things like that, but, going back to Ashokan as well. But there's definitely room for us to look at different types of make small, bigger.
Yep. And then the other thing I was interested in that slide that showed the overall enrollment by building and how, sort of anecdotally, there's a feeling that, some buildings are busting at the seams. But when we look historically, they have had higher numbers, and maybe part of that sort of feeling of overcrowding is like particularly at the schools that don't have cafeterias, right? So the students are eating in the classroom all day, and it feels a little bit smaller even than it is. So that's not part of this presentation, but I think it has to be part of our discussion, that if we were to add classrooms, we also want to look at adding
Different types of spaces.
common spaces, right? Right, which is more than the millions you've already got on the board. And so it's how to increase those opportunities and make sure that we are operating under the conditions that we have as effectively as we can. The other, I'll hold that off for the
Okay.
next time. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Gavin, I think we've have some direction here from the board then in terms of planning presentations and continuing this conversation. First of all, let's come up with a plan if you can by our July 20th meeting. I think it's July 20th, right, Mrs. Ciliberti?
Yep.
Okay. July 20th meeting for a preliminary plan in terms of how we plan on engaging the community.
Yep.
Working into next school year, the early part of next school year, how we're going to continue that conversation and make it more
Yep.
broadly public for our community to be aware of it. So when they're back from summer vacation and they're tuning in, they are aware and can certainly be part of that conversation moving forward in the first phases of the school year.
Sure.
Secondly, I would like to see a plan in terms of how we're going to be addressing the Rockville Center specific data and preliminary plan in terms of maybe when you're setting your presentation calendar for the board
Yep.
in stages, how we're going to be implementing that and informing the board and the public of that as well. And thirdly, the pre-K spacing projections. I think, Ms. Love, we start talking about that in early winter, midwinter, right?
January.
Yes. So maybe at that time, we should have a conversation based on our spacing projections, what that might look like in terms of if it's a possibility and continuing that conversation as well.
Sure.
Yep.
That'd be great.
Anything else? Did I summarize that? All right, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to policies. We have several policies at stage one. 1130, number of members and terms in office. Any comments or questions on 1130?
I would agree with no revisions.
Okay, to move this to stage two?
Yes.
Policy 2120, use of parliamentary procedure, basically saying that we follow Robert's Rules of Order.
Yes, thank you for
Okay.
knowing them.
Yes. Okay, to move this to stage two?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. 3130, appropriately on Flag Day, flag display. Adding a line, in addition, the flag must be displayed in each assembly room.
Meaning auditoriums,
Large rooms.
any kind of common space.
Any other comments or questions on 3130?
Nope.
Okay, move this to stage 2.
Yes.
Okay, 4210, administrative organization and operation. I had a question, letter A. It says, it refers to the chief school officer to building principal. Is there any reason why it's not referred to as the superintendent of schools to be reflective of other policies that we have? I'm assuming the chief school officer is the superintendent.
Yes, it
I hope
is.
so.
We could make that change.
I think it's so often in our other policies referred to as the superintendent of schools. I personally would like to see that changed.
Sure.
And I think it's also in letter C.
Yep.
So just throughout the policy.
Yes.
Okay.
Letter C. Yep.
I mean, the superintendent is a school officer, but he's also the superintendent of
Yeah,
schools.
I just, in so many of our other policies, it says superintendent, so I don't know.
No, I
I
concur.
like consistency.
I concur.
As much as possible. Okay, any other comments or questions on 4210? I'm okay moving it to stage 2 if everyone else is, just with that change, okay? Thanks. Policy 5140, administration of the budget. Some slight suggested changes there.
Stylistic in the last part is, required by law.
Yep, thank you. Okay to move this?
Yes.
6210, certified personnel. No revisions required. Okay to move this?
Yes. Good.
7221, early graduation.
Mara just changed the citation.
From the
The
New York
previous.
State Code of Rules and
Yes.
Regs, yeah,
Nothing's
perfect.
changed other than the citation.
The wording has.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
That if it's still Jim would not prevent you. Okay.
Okay to move this?
Yes.
8420, opening exercises.
Same.
Okay,
Good.
okay, thank you. Currently at stage 3, we have 6150, alcohol, drugs, and other substances. Is everyone okay to move this to approval at the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. And 6151, drug-free workplace, also at stage 3. Can we move this to approval at the next meeting?
Yes.
Thank you.
That was easy.
Thanks, Mr. Barnowski. Mr. Gavin, we have acceptance of 2 gifts.
Yes, we have a generous donation from the Tommy Brawl Foundation of $5,500 to the district for center stage productions going in the future. We're super appreciative of the foundation, and we know that they have put it to good use in the past. So thank you very much. We also had a gift of $750 from our wellness walk that we recently had. So thank you very much from the Southside High School PTA for their generosity for $750 that we will also put to good use. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Burrell Foundation and Southside High School PTA. Can I have a motion to approve the gifts?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes as listed on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Can I have a motion to approve financial reports as listed on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye. Can I have a motion to approve receipts of financial reports as listed on the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Can I have a motion to approve board actions 1 through 7?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a safe ending to the school year. Oh, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now, everyone, go have a safe and healthy summer. Thank you very much.
Robert's rules.
Robert's rules, you got that right in.